Hey guys, welcome back to the Sam Powell podcast. I'm not sure what episode this is going to be. I had a guest that was going to come on this morning, and they unfortunately had to cancel or postpone rather due to unforeseeable circumstances. So I'm sort of just going at this one a little bit free. I haven't planned anything. It's going to be very unstructured, and maybe it can be an exercise of me seeing how often or how little I can say and like. But at first I was a little bit worried actually even just starting like this, because so far most of my podcasts have had quite a lot of writing, quite a lot of thought placed into them. Most of my week is usually spent with an hour or so in the morning writing about the things that I've learnt throughout the week, the things I'm reading throughout the week, the things I'm listening to, even the conversations I've had, and it's also built up knowledge over time that I've gone back to, interrogated again, and so there can be a lot of work that goes on behind the podcast, and when I was thinking about whether I should even start this or not, the conclusion I came to was that if I didn't do it, it wouldn't align with some of the principles of authenticity that I've been sort of sharing so far to others. And the principles of authenticity that I'm thinking of is when you're communicating with people, not thinking about what you just want to say, or the thing you want to say next when you're in a conversation with someone, because you're not actually then having an open dialogue with that individual, or you're not having an authentic, honest dialogue with that individual. And I thought, well, am I not having then an authentic, open dialogue with myself if I'm coming into it in such a structured way? I don't believe that's accurate, because I mean all of the writing that I'm doing before then is very genuine, but why not have a completely unstructured opportunity, a completely honest conversation, authentic conversation with myself, in which things are planned, to have a dialogue with myself, where I'm not thinking about what I just want to say or say next, but actually just engaging with myself. So, so what do I even want to talk about? What do I want to discuss? I mean, I just feel like there's been so much going on actually recently in my life. But maybe some of the most remarkable or impactful things that have occurred to me, and probably one of the most serious or dramatic ones is something I wasn't sure I'd ever talk about publicly, or wasn't sure when I'd want to talk about publicly, because I think it was something I'd always want to share, but didn't know when would be the right time. And often it was things of thoughts of, well, if I talk about this now and it's so early on, and what if this gets out to my job, and then it affects things like that. But the thing I'm talking about is in relation to addiction, and specifically substance addiction. And the reason why I say it's so significant to me lately is because over a month ago, I what I would consider relapsed, and I've been on a path or a journey of sobriety for about 4 years now. It was at the end of in the latter part of 2020 when I started, we'll say, practicing sobriety is maybe the way to describe it. And since then, I've essentially done stints of complete sobriety, upwards of say 3-4 months of not touching alcohol, drugs, what else? What I was sort of throwing in there as well, like cheap sex. What else was I even like throwing in there? I mean, any like hedonistic, short-term gratifying like pleasures and things that I didn't even have a problem with, but or like we're addicted to, but I know have addictive like elements to it. So even like my relationship with social media, with like TV or like pornography, things that like I don't engage with or addicted to, but it was important for me to categorize under this umbrella of addiction because I think I knew that if say cigarettes as well, like tobacco, like there was a period of which I was smoking as well. But I think it was important to put everything under this umbrella because I think I identified in myself the possibility that by say sacrificing or getting rid of one, I would immediately start searching for another thing to replace it. And so it was important for me to put everything into this bucket. To I think inhibit the possibility of me almost like sneaking up on myself, coming over my own shoulder, like knocking on my own shoulder, monkey with the tambourine. Hey, why don't you do this? Even food comes into this. In terms of like junk food, like bullshit food, not intentional eating. So, and as I said, like even though I didn't have a problem with a lot of these things that I've listed on there, they were never things I was addicted to or even like used in a millennia. It was important to categorize it into this bucket. But why it? So as I said, recently it was over a month ago, and I think it was something I didn't want to speak about until I'd had at least 2, 3, 4 months past this like relapse. But what I'm thinking is there's never a perfect time to actually talk about my experiences with addiction and when is it the right time to talk about it. But this one in particular, and so I need to backtrack to this past 4 years. As I said, there were these periods of 3 months, 4 months, maybe it was like 1 month, and I was in say this complete sobriety. And maybe what broke that 3 month stint, that 1 month stint, was where I'd have a glass of wine, or I'd have a couple beers. With cigarettes, when I quit them, and I never touched them again. So it was never like going back to them. With drugs, it was I think there was like a period of 2 years in which I hadn't touched them again, and then there was like a small exposure to them. And so that's been my relationship with with addiction, or with like substance abuse, and I think as I said, like cheap or casual like sex in there. And there was like a period of say where there would be a 7 months I think it doesn't count to classify like say being in a relationship as abstinence from an addiction. But there were periods, say, not in a relationship where, 3 months, 6 months in which I wasn't actively engaging with like casual sex because I was only wanting to engage with women where there was the potential for like long-term relationship. So that's been the sort of the past 4 years at a very like very broad overview. But as I said, back in December. I relapsed. Not bad at all. But I didn't go out and come back 3 days later, lost a phone, wallet, and have no idea like what happened for hours as a part of that. But it was drastically significant for me because of how bad the low was after it. And I think it was so appalling to myself at like why I felt so shameful, why I felt so embarrassed, why I almost like hated myself so much the day after. It was because so much in my life was going right up until that point. I had got out of a relationship that was bringing me further away from my authentic and like best self. I was the healthiest and fittest I'd ever been. Work was going very well for me. I'd committed and started with my own personal brand I was building and my entrepreneurial projects. And I'd also met someone that was bringing me closer to a spiritual like path, something that I'd started on a journey with. But I think the exposure to an individual who truly had grace showed me the potential of what leading a religious life could be. And I think I was quite in awe of this individual, and I was able to have sight then of where I could go, what I could achieve, that sense of peace with self, that almost transcendence from this physical realm, the mondial. And I was so happy like with where I was at, and I was so excited about the future. And so when I hit this hurdle, the after result. Oh, forgive me. Just had to pause the podcast for a second, and with that, I also lost my train of thought. So I apologize where I was up to. I'm gonna get back there. I think I had a rough idea of where I was going with the conversation. So I was talking about why it was so significant this time, why this relapse was so bad. Yeah, I can't recall exactly, but we'll hopefully spark up a conversation again, and we'll get back in there. But so why this was so dramatic for me on this occasion, I think, as I said, it had to do with so much of my life going so well at the time, and it became so apparent to me. Actually, I think I do recall. I was speaking to about this individual I'd met, and this path of grace that was now being exposed to me. And so that was very apparent to me the day after, because it felt like I'd fallen myself so far from grace. And I was listening to Denzel Washington speak about that when the devil is not favoring you, when he's not after you, it's probably because you're doing the wrong thing. You're already on his side of the fence. Whereas when you're favored by God, you're also favored by the devil. I heard Mike Tyson say this to Francis Ngannou, that when you're favored by God, you're also favored by the devil. And so that's when you have to be the most careful. And it felt like I had truly given myself to the path of the path of the light. I'd started playing for Team Light, and I succumbed to my to my own devils, to my own hell. And so that was quite apparent to me the next day, that fall of grace. And it was so much further than when I was living a life completely led by hedonism, by hedonistic ideals, because the fall becomes almost romantic when you're so deep in it. When you're waking up the next day at 2 p.m, hungover as shit, hating yourself, crusty-eyed, just reeking of alcohol. It's part of the mosaic. It's part of this sad Renaissance painting. It fits the scene. It has that faux poeticism to it, or at least that's what you tell yourself. But when you're leading a life of grace, that contrast of it is just so intense. It's so apparent, and it's so devastating, I think, to yourself. But I think that the thing that stood out for me so much, and what I was speaking to with my best friend Francis the 2 days after this relapse, was the idea of dependability and reliability. That at the time in our lives is we're 28 years old, and we're at a point in our lives when we're probably or should be getting married soon. We should be starting a family. So we should be, we're in the process of becoming fathers soon. Not that any of us have kids at the moment, but that process is starting to unravel itself. So what is the type of husband you want to be? What is the type of father you want to be? And at the top of that list, what I think it means to be a good husband, to be a good father, to be a good man, is to be 100% reliable and dependable. And that is the last thing you are when you have addictions and the thing and who you are the day after. Because if you're still drunk, if you've still got gear in your system, you can't. And someone you love calls you, hey, I need you to come pick me up. Something's gone wrong. I need you to be like here. I need you to like drive this person. You can't do that. There's still gear. There's still alcohol in your system. It's oozing out of you. Your mind's not sharp either. You can't. You're going to make mistakes, and that's not what a husband is. That's not what a father is. That's not what a friend is either. And when I was having this conversation with Francis as we were walking several days after, that's what hit me so hard. So hard. It absolutely flattened me. This idea of being completely unreliable and undependable. I'm not sure if that's a word. And just not dependable. I think it's like you're almost failing on the honor of yourself. And people, we're not perfect. We make mistakes. That was a hiccup on my path. It was a hurdle that I hit. But at a certain point, it is unacceptable. It's not a standard which can break. And I regret this relapse. I regret that I fell from grace, but I am able to find a silver lining from it, because it's never been clearer to me that I will never, ever succumb to addiction again, ever. It's never been so clear in my mind, because of how vivid the hell was the next day. That idea of not being reliable, dependable to a future partner, to a future girlfriend, to a future wife is crippling to me. And if it's not crippling to you, then I don't think you understand what it means to be someone's wife, someone's husband, to be someone's father or their mother. I've working in hospitality for the past decade, where the exposure to alcohol and drugs was so high. And I met many fathers, the odd mother, who had very serious alcohol and drug problems. And they would speak about spending time with their children or being with their children while they're either drunk, on drugs, or the next day just so hungover and in a state. And I wanted to say it's so embarrassing, but it's even more than that. It's so shameful. It's as if you're so lucky nothing truly bad has happened yet. And maybe it's because I've been exposed to the worst of what can happen, either accidental or intentional. The things that are on my mind is people who have been in car accidents, people who have been in accidents in their home, fallen through roofs, people who have committed suicide and left children behind. People whose partners have died in some type of accident. And then there's only one parent left, or there's only one sibling left in a family. And I didn't realize that this was the most significant thing that to consider when it came to addiction, when it came to drugs, alcohol, even cigarettes, which in a way I believe is almost this kind of slow suicide, this slow abuse of the body. But this was the thing that has no line has been drawn deeper in the sand than this idea of a responsibility to yourself and a responsibility to the loved ones around you. And I think I need to underline or bolder that responsibility to the other people around you, because the purpose and the meaning that gives you, I think, is the thing that should help you cross over that barrier of addiction. Because if you're suffering addiction, if you're abusing yourself with drugs, alcohol, sex, cigarettes, porn, food, you're already fucking yourself. You already don't respect yourself. You're okay with abusing yourself. You're okay with causing that violence and that destruction on yourself. I know that because that's how I felt about myself. And I packaged it up, put a bow on it in this bullshit, poetic kind of thing. And so you tried to cultivate a path outside of addiction by this honor or this respectability of yourself that's out the fucking window. You need to become completely outward focusing, like I was talking about at the very start of this podcast, in terms of having a genuine conversation with you, an authentic conversation with someone else. Isn't about preparing what you've spoken about, what you want to say. It's about being completely attentive to the other people around you. And that's what I believe is the path outside of addiction, which you're becoming completely responsible, attentive, respectful, and dependable and reliable for the people outside of you. That's who you need to be holding the standard to now, not yourself, because you fucked the standard with yourself. You can't hold yourself to your own standard. That's already been proven. It's the reason why you have these problems in the first place. So throw that out the window. Start focusing on people around you. And if you don't have anyone else around you because you've completely fucked all the relationships in your life, bring new ones in. Hopefully you've still got a job, and then you can dedicate yourself to the work or the people that you work with and upholding a standard to them. Or start upholding the standard to God. God is the one that you live up to now. There's a reason why the best known antidote to addiction is starting a practice and a relationship with God, or with spirituality, with religion. That's why it's used in the 12-step program. So I want to see if I can clarify or close out this idea of dependability and responsibility, because I think it's significant, and I'm not sure if I've completely given weight to it that it deserves, and how impactful it was to me. But maybe I don't have any more to say. It weighs on me heavily, this idea, and I hope I've been able to articulate the depth of it. It's the thing that whenever now I'm exposed to the things that can send me back down the wrong path. Just recently I was away camping with some of my closest friends, people who still engage, drinking, and in Australia, gosh, is there a culture that loves alcohol and drugs anymore? We're up there with the Dutch, the French, the English, and the Americans, but there is an aggressiveness to it, I think, when it comes to Australian drinking and drug culture, which is quite uncanny. And I'm not trying to critique that or have a go at it. That's its whole episode or thing, but it's never been easier to say no when I consistently remind myself of who I'm dependable and responsible for myself, but who I'm responsible and dependable to. Because who's the type of person I want to be, not for myself, but for other people. I want to be the type of guy that can get called at 5 a.m. in the morning, 12 at midnight, 3 in the morning. Hey, I'm in the shit. Things are bad. I really need your help. And I could say, yep, I'm there in a second. Absolutely. Unquestionably, I'm there in a second. Because if I'm stressed, I'm tired, whatever else is going on in my life, that's fine. I can handle that. But if I'm pissed, if I'm on gear, if let's future, really expand this into future. If I've spent the past, 10, 15 years smoking cigarettes and my lungs are fucked, and, I can't chase after someone, whatever it is, I can't rely on my own body anymore. Just reminding myself of that. It's never been easier to deny the short-term gratification of these addictions. So that's the thing that I keep saying to myself, reminding myself of. That's the standard of which I fall to. And, I tie that to God, and I tie that to the people I'm now meeting in my life, the role models that also uphold this standard. Jordan Peterson, Russell Brand have been huge role models to me in my life, and they represent that standard to me. Both of these individuals don't drink, Russell Brand, obviously very, very public in terms of his battles and relationship with addiction. Jordan Peterson with alcohol, cigarettes, and what consistently shines for me with both of them is this dependability that you should be. This sort of standard you're upholding yourself to, and that aiming up to be the best version of yourself in sacrifice for others. Not sacrificing yourself to short-term hedonistic gratification. I'm just thinking if there's even a bit of a story or a routine that I can share with you all that may resonate with individuals who have experienced some struggle or some struggle with addiction, with substances. And so when I was working as a wine sommelier, and I worked as a wine sommelier sober for quite a number of years, but say prior to that period, the routine working 5 days a week, and there's roughly around 50 hours of work, and there are shifts that might go from 11:30 in the morning through till 1, 2 a.m. at night. A couple other sort of shorter shifts that would maybe go from 3, 4 p.m. in the afternoon through till 1, 2 in the morning. And on any one of these days, you would start drinking even just a little bit before service. And, you'd just be tasting like wine, but it'd be a little bit. So that might be at 11:30 in the morning. 4 in the afternoon, you start tasting wine. And then throughout the evening, you're serving roughly 70 guests, maybe 150 guests, just depending on how they split up the restaurant. And you're expected to taste every one of these wines. And I've worked in some venues where there's the possibility to spit the wine, but I've also worked in other venues where there isn't that possibility. So even if you're just taking small sips, I wouldn't put it past that you're at least having two glasses of wine a night, at the very least, if you're really trying to take small sips. But at that time, I wasn't. So I was probably drinking close to 3, maybe 4 glasses of wine a night in terms of just the sipping of wine, going back to wines to taste again. Maybe people leave some of their wine left over. And so just for context, that 3.5 glasses of wine, we'll say, or even 4, that's sitting somewhere between just over a half to 3/4 of a bottle of wine. And then you have knockoff drinks as well. And it doesn't matter if it was a bad service, here, have a drink. Oh, you had a good service, here, have a drink. And you're having, 1, 2 pints of beer or glasses of wine. And so every night you're having 5, 6 drinks. And you're then doing that 5 days a week. And on the 6th day, because you're in the hospitality scene, maybe you want to go out for dinner or lunch at some other restaurant. Or on that last shift of the week, you're going to one of the hospo bars in Melbourne, and, then you're on half a bender at that point, and you're having another 10, 15 drinks. Yep. And on that, that day off, you're going to a restaurant, then you're having a couple drinks, a bottle of wine. And then on that Sunday, you might be going to trade tastings where you could be tasting anywhere from 50 to 200 wines. And then you're back at work again the next day. and the cycle repeats. So, and I don't, and that is a more unique lifestyle of a wine sommelier, but it's not that far off for people who aren't wine sommeliers, who are just waiters or bartenders. You're just consistently drinking throughout the week. And so, and I think, your tolerance builds up, but I think it's the case rather that you're dropping your sort of equilibrium, or like the vitality of your equilibrium so far low, you actually don't even know what it feels like to be good anymore. But when you're in that lifestyle, you're very far from being reliable and dependable. Constantly fatigued, and the work adds to that. Poor circadian rhythms, but when you're exposing yourself to drinking and drugs that consistently, you're just a shell of a person, really. And that was the life that I was leading, really, from the age of 21, 22, up until the age of about 24. So we'll say like there was a strong 2 years just being like that. 2 years. Say that period of 22, 24 when I was outside of university. But it's a very vicious lifestyle, and you can't be dependent on in that period. And it's like you can also consider the amount of money that you're spending on it as well. There's nothing else like going on in your life when you're so deep into it. There's nothing else you can live up to, dedicate yourself to, support other individuals. And so I had the realization when I was working in hospital like that, and I started to meet individuals who were a lot older than me. So at the time, as I said, I was 22, 24, just turned 24, that I was working with individuals who were 28, 30, 35, even a bit older, 40. And they'd been living this lifestyle now, not just for the 2 years I had, but for 10, 15, 20 years. And they looked like shit. They looked horrible. They looked so unhealthy. Yellow skin, gaps in their teeth. They'd smell horrible. They also looked about 10 years older than what they actually were. And just no vitality to them, no energy, just this always deep-seated pessimism to them. And that was apparent to me. It confronted me that was the pathway I was heading down, and I didn't want to end up like that. So I knew there needed to be a change, but I didn't understand what that would be because I was completely obsessed. I loved hospitality. I loved wine. I loved alcohol. I loved the lifestyle of it. And it was so deeply romanticized. I had such an infatuation for wine, the history of it, the culture, its relationship with food, with customer service, with dining out. And so I tried for a period to separate the party that's associated with hospitality from the wine. And I happened to move overseas to the Netherlands, and I worked over there as a wine sommelier. And I was able to do that for a period, but because of the restaurant that I was working, it wasn't a super high caliber venue. There wasn't an opportunity to really excel with the wine work, to really grow it into something quite exciting. But there was still a lot of excitement. I mean, I was at the epicenter of European wine, not production wise, but logistically wise. Basically, everything's going through the Netherlands, and so I had access to some of the most incredible cellars I've ever seen in my life. But quite quickly, just casual drinking, smoking cigarettes came back as the priority. And for those that are familiar with the Netherlands, their drinking culture is quite intense as well, similar to Australia. You have different types of beers for different times of the day, as you're progressing through a meal. And it was some very, very heavy drinking going on. And I worked with some, I was going to say, the alcoholics, huge drinkers, the chefs that were big, everyone smoked. He smoked a lot, and people that would start drinking, 3 in the afternoon, 4 in the afternoon. By the time 8 o'clock rolled around and we'd have another service, everyone was shit faced. And you'd keep drinking. You have drinks after work, and my God, you do this almost every day. I'm giggling now because it's so wild. It's so ridiculous. It's so ridiculous. You're just doing this for weeks on end because you're working. I mean, God, we worked so hard over there. You're clocking in 60, 70 hours a week, and it was hard work. It was always understaffed. You're doing 30,000 steps a day, roughly speaking. And there was all the shit of COVID as well, the extra signing in of people and getting people to sanitize, and on top of that you're on the border of Germany where I was, and so you're just having different cultures coming in, different languages being spoken. It was tough. It was really tough. It was a challenging time, and so you sort of self-medicated through the suffering of it with drinking. And it didn't matter if it was a good or a bad shift. Here, have a drink. And so I went back down a pretty vicious lifestyle there. And thank God, I had some moment of purpose come out of me in there. And look, that was the best example of having no one that depended on me, because I was there completely on my own. So who was I living up to? What standard was I trying to uphold? I was literally on my own. And there was a scary moment where I took it too far one night, and I thought, geez, I almost died there. And I'm going to die on the other side of the world where my family's not going to be able to retrieve me. They don't even know where I am. And gosh, that is not the way that I want to go out. And so that was a big wake up call. I recognized how fickle life can be. And that's when I first committed to an idea of sobriety, that, hey, maybe I don't want to do this wine thing anymore. And I spent a lot of time thinking and writing, and I came to the decision that I didn't want to work in wine anymore, or as a career at least. And so I decided I wanted to go back to university. This is what I was planning out while in the Netherlands. And I eventually got back to Australia, and I was able to start studying again. But at the time, I needed work while I was studying to be able to cover my life. And I sort of got back into it, back into the partying, the drinking. I was trying so hard not to. And I was like, okay, I'm only going to drink one day a week. But it was the one day that would get me. on that one day, there would be drinking, drugs, smoking. Couldn't get out of it. It was always that one. And then I came to the realization it just had to be everything and all the time. And that's when my life started to get astronomically better. Like the things that return to you, the vitality that returns to you, the freshness, the sharpness of your mind, your memory, my God, your memory becomes so sharp. It's incredible. And it only gets better. It's not as if like, after a month off, your memory is just fantastic, your mind's sharp. It consistently gets better and better. So that's when I reached that late 2020 to now period, that 4 years of sobriety, with these like short stints in which I tried to, or alcohol sort of reintroduced itself to my life, and I had to remove it again. But as I started to become more aware of the responsibility that I wanted to uphold towards other individuals, that's what made it easier for me to stay consistent, to keep sort of leading that charge and going up against it. Anyway, I'm gonna leave this episode here. Thank you for listening in on this more sporadic style of podcasts. It came from a very, very authentic place. There was no notes. There was no preparation for this. This was just speaking to something that's been on my mind that I've been thinking about a little bit. But if you've ever experienced any form of addiction, know anyone that's experienced any form of addiction, you've seen the how it can unfold, I'd love you to leave a comment about how you're able to confront it, go about it, things that sort of like help you aim up in the same way that this dependability and reliability, these values help me aim up. I'd love to know how you do it. So thank you again for listening. The few subscribers that I have, it's so fantastic. And I'll catch you on the next one.